Hello. You may be wondering why I'm making this video from what looks like a patch of dirt surrounded by a fence. You know, I've made you videos from up at beautiful miradors, I've made you videos on top of pyramids, I've made you videos kind of like from all over the kind of place. Usually trying to find somewhere beautiful or interesting to incorporate into it. And yet, perhaps this is one of the most important places from which to make a video. This is the place where corn will grow. This is the corner of my garden that I will be seeding in the next few days with corn for a grand experiment, but also, kind of like this is really an important part of life, right? An important part of life where we grow our food. If we don't have anything to sustain us, then, what are we really doing? So really kind of like thinking from that point of view, perhaps this is one of the most important and sacred places that I could be making a video from. And so, of course, this video that I'm making today is for the Trecena of Anil, the Trecena where we are focusing on planting that which is to come to abundance, planting that which is to come to ripeness, planting that which brings us joy. And there are some particularly interesting things that are happening in this Trecena. There's some particularly interesting things happening exactly at this point in the year. And for those of us who are in the Northern Hemisphere, then of course this is very much planting time. So it's interesting to see when, the Trecena, which represents, getting your seeds in the ground, planting something new into the ground, is coinciding with the right time to do it. This, I think, is an opportunity not to be missed. Now, if that wasn't enough, there's some other things that I want to bring in later in this video with regards to some other interests of mine with regards to astronomy and archaeoastronomy in particular, which I'll talk about in a little while because it falls just a few days later in the Trecena. So anyway, let's begin the Trecena with one Anil. Okay, so one Anil. One, the seed. Anil, ripening. Anil, a great day to be working in your garden. And of course, kind of like this is literally putting in the seeds that you want to ripen. And so, yes, we could look at that literally right now. This is exactly the right time to be planting our gardens or planting the corn right here in Guatemala. The first rains just came through last week. And so we know that rainy season is right around the corner. We can plant our seeds. We know we're not going to have to water them. In fact, kind of like it's interesting to see that this ground here in places is actually darkened from moisture that's already fallen. So it's exactly the right time to do this. But we could also look at it not just from a physical viewpoint, but from a metaphorical viewpoint of planting the seeds that you want to grow, that you want to bring to abundance. Now, we could see everything as being something that we're planting. We could see, in general, in life, what are we planting into our garden? What projects are we bringing in? How are we thinking about things? What seeds are we planting into our world? And we could think of this as well, kind of like from what words we're using. What seeds of consciousness are you planting into the world? Are those the seeds that you want to grow? Kind of like where is our focus right now? Is it on planting and nurturing something that we want to grow into the world? Or perhaps we're talking about things that we're angry about or we don't agree with and that kind of thing. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody should gloss over what they don't agree with or particular violations of rights or whatever it might be. But where is our focus? Because sometimes we become distracted and we're putting in our constant talk, our constant seeding, as it were. It's kind of like we're talking about all the stuff that we're angry about rather than the stuff that we want to bring in. We're not planting the seeds of the sweet corn that we want to grow. We're putting all of our focus somewhere else. So, as I say, it's not to say kind of like let's not avoid issues, as it were. But in this time of planting, what seeds do you want to plant for the future? In 260 days' time, what do you want to be harvesting? What do you want to be gathering from this field, whether it's physical or metaphorical? Ask, what seeds can I plant? Okay, this could be a project, this could be a plan, this could be an idea. It's just about what you want to put in, because it's a joyful time of ripening. So ask yourself what it is that you wish to ripen. From 1 Anil, we're then going to go into 2 Toch. So it's again an interesting thing, because kind of like 1 Anil being the kind of like the promise of the new harvest to come, and then 2 Toch. Well, we have Toch, which represents giving. Toch, which represents service and payment. Toch, which can represent sacrifice in a way. And we have the number 2, which can represent partnership, but it can also represent self-sacrifice. And, I would say that for whatever it is that you want to plant, whatever project that you're putting your energy into, the seeds that you're planting in your garden, well, they're going to need a little bit of help. They're going to need a little bit of energy with which to grow. Maybe you're going to have to, pull out the weeds from around them, maybe a bit of hoeing, maybe a bit of watering, fertilizing, whatever it might be. You've got to tend things. This could be seen as self-sacrifice, sacrificing of your time in order to ensure that what you've planted has the opportunity to grow to fruition. We can see the number 2 representing relationships and Toch representing service. And so again, it's like, how can you be of service? How can I be? How can we be? However we want to put it, of service to those who we love. Within our relationships, what energy can we give in order to bring them to something brighter, bring that beauty, bring that abundance, bring that joy of Anil to them? Well, 2 Toch is suggesting this kind of like this input of energy, this service, this self-sacrifice, giving up of our time in order to make something that we love grow stronger and blossom and come to its fruition. From 2 Toch, we then move into 3 Tzi. So Tzi, the Nawal of faith and loyalty and unconditional love. Tzi, the Nawal of justice. And here we see it connected with the number 3, representing the inner world, representing going within, looking within in order to create. Also representing the home. 3 Tzi can be seen as how we can be loyal to what we have in our home and our garden. Again, this is kind of like keeping our focus on what it is that we're planting, what it is that we're growing. It can also be looking at what we've got going on within ourselves. Where do we have our loyalty? And, as we go through our lives, of course, we're loyal to our family, we're loyal to our partners, we're loyal to our community, we're loyal to, whatever it might be. But is there a pull from the loyalty towards ourselves? In this time when we're growing these new seeds, when we're bringing things in, looking into ourselves, looking into our soul, looking into our home, and asking ourselves, where do we need to apply that unconditional love towards ourselves? Where can we apply that unconditional love within our home? What else can we bring to its true brilliance? What are we planting there? And so 3 Tzi, I always think of the 3 days as being particularly reflective, going within, and asking ourselves, kind of like, am I applying the unconditional love that I have for those around me to my own self as well? Because sometimes, kind of like we give everybody else a little bit more leeway than ourselves. And so 3T may well be looking at, kind of like that unconditional love for self that we may be missing as well. Now, there's also something we could see with regards to T representing our vices. And 3T, kind of like taking a good hard look within ourselves and saying, right, okay, am I still being plagued by my vices? Am I still being, kind of like susceptible to my vices? Or are these something I can overcome? 3T may well bring those kind of things up. From 3T, we then move into 4 bats. Well, kind of like this is a pretty joyful Trecena, right? Starting on 1 Anil, which is joy and abundance, and then moving through, and here we're at 4 bats. Bats representing our art, bats representing beauty. And here with the number 4 representing this physical plane of existence, it's like, make it physical. Whatever it is, that beauty that we want to bring into our world, our art, whatever we consider that to be, how can we stabilize it into our world? Let's go out and make art. Let's go out and bring joy. Let's go out and weave something very tangible into the world, because 4 bats gives us the platform on which to do that. It's about really making it material, taking it out of the kind of like the realms of thought or inspiration and manifesting it into the physical realm. So if you've got any kind of artistic project, then 4 bats would be a wonderful time to actually be, putting pen to paper or brush to canvas or however it might be, getting that art form physically down into the physical world. Now, after 4 bats comes a very interesting day. Yes, it's the day 5 Yes, it is. We can see the number 5 representing work, and we can see representing the path. So working on our path, well, yes, kind of like there's that part of it. And of course, kind of like this is part of our Trecena of ripening, coming up to the, kind of like the grand finale as such. But really, when we look at it, 5 putting our energy into our path. This is a very important thing to be doing on 5 But there are some other things that I want to draw attention to on that day 5 because there are 2 really kind of like important things that happen. The first is the solar zenith transit here in Guatemala, or here just at the north of Lake Atitlan. Now, at this line, we're about 14.8 degrees north. And one of the things that we find is that at this latitude, we have a period between the solar zenith transits of 105 days, and of course 365 minus 105 gives us 260 days on the other side. Okay, now what is the solar zenith transit? Well, if we live in the northern hemisphere, outside of the tropics, we would say that the sun will always be in the south at midday. Okay, where I come from, it's kind of like, doesn't matter whether it's winter solstice, whether it's summer solstice, the sun is always going to be in the south at midday. Now here, because we are in the tropics, there are certain points of the year where the sun is directly overhead at midday. It's 90 degrees east-west, 90 degrees north-south. Okay, so at solar noon, which is about 12:08 p.m. here in, by the lake, on that day 5 we will experience the solar zenith transit. Now, I'm going to do a whole video about this. Maybe it's going to be live. I don't know quite what I'm going to do. I'll announce it kind of like on the day before or something like that. where I will line up a tube and make sure it's exactly vertical, and then we get to see that it's only at solar noon that the sun will go through the tube. Okay, it's like a day when you have no shadow. Now, the solar zenith transit was very important. There are temples which are dedicated to this by having these zenith tubes. We also see that this is something that was measured, both the solar zenith and the solar nadir, which is kind of like the opposite when the sun is directly, kind of like underneath at midnight, which gets even more complicated as to working out how that was possible to calculate. I don't know, I can't necessarily help with that. And I think I'll actually do, kind of like a separate video to go into those things in more detail and, include a little article that I wrote about it. But there is something that seems very important with this. And what I see with it is that it's got a lot to do with the planting of the corn. And it's just super interesting for me that it happens to fall in this time in this Trecena of Anil. It's kind of like, if you imagine, like one positive effect lining up above another positive effect. Okay? So it's kind of like things like lining up for this. So this will be my corn planting day. This will be when I choose to plant my corn, will actually be on the day 5 on the solar zenith day, to make sure that it goes into the ground on that day. And, one way that we could possibly see it would be kind of like the energy of Father Sun directly entering the womb of Mother Earth and kind of like bringing the fertility, bringing the blessings to the corn which has been planted. Now, interestingly enough, if we follow the life cycle of the corn, we'll find that in kind of like middle of July to late July, we should have some cobs of corn. We can then double it over, harvest it a couple of weeks later when it's dry, and get our second crop in the ground, ready for the second solar zenith transit, which will be on August 12th, which should be the day 6 Noch, if I remember rightly. Anyhow, so 5 working on your path, the day to get, kind of like to really get that planting growing, in particularly here. Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to mention here is another artifact that I'm really interested in, called the Nebra Sky Disk. Now, you may have seen me talk about this before. I went to visit it a couple of years ago when I was in Germany. And this is an artifact from Central Europe, from Central Germany, from about 3,600 years ago. And one of the things that it seems to show on it is the Pleiades and a crescent moon, which appears to be marking a day 3 days after new moon, when the crescent moon is conjunct with the Pleiades. Well, interestingly enough, on this day 5 we will have exactly that configuration, because it's about 3 days after the new moon, and we will have crescent moon conjunct Pleiades. Now, that will disappear into the ground in the west at sunset. And from what I understand from Barbara Tedlock's book, Time in the Highland Maya, the Pleiades, actually, the word which is used to describe them here is mots, which means the handful of seeds. And so what you see is that when you get the crescent moon conjunct with the Pleiades, this is when the Pleiades are disappearing into the ground at sunset. So, like, we won't see the constellation of Taurus, where the Pleiades reside. We're not going to see that for a couple of months or so, because it's going to disappear into the ground. And so this is like planting our seeds into the ground. This also occurs on 5 So, look, if you haven't planted your garden yet, can I make a recommendation of planting it on 5 Because it just feels like, this is yet another layer on the top, which is saying, get the seeds in the ground. Okay, so I think that that's really interesting. Now, interestingly enough, the other part of the sky disk shows the rising of the Pleiades at sunset, when the Pleiades would be conjunct with the full moon, and that will come sort of like in like October or November sort of time. It's usually kind of like aligning with some kind of like New Year or Day of the Dead kind of thing. It's kind of like that which rises back from the ground, that which has been buried rises again. And so it's a celebration of the ancestors. So anyway, like I say, I know that's going off the topic of the Trecena and making this video a little bit longer, but I hope that it's something that's rather enjoyable for you. So after 5 we then come to 6 Ach. Now, this again we can see within the Trecena of Anil as being a very, very fruitful day. We can see Ach as representing the father figure of the family. We can see it as representing the corn itself and the cornstalk. And here, what we see with the number 6, the physical plane of existence connected with the heart of the sky and the heart of the earth. So it's, again, this connection which we could almost have seen on the solar zenith day, invigorating the cornstalk, invigorating our spinal columns, invigorating our staff of office in order to bring stability into the physical plane. We can also see Ach as representing the head of the family, and of course number 6 representing family values. Now, the Ach can represent our spinal column as well. And as a representation of our spinal column, we can see that it gives us strength to stand up for what is right. And that number 6, to bring stability to the family, to bring stability to the home. And so when we see those things coming together, I mean, the 6 is this really nice balanced number. And Ach is the one, well, I sometimes say that Ach might be the one with the unpopular opinion, because sometimes Ach has to speak out about injustice or whatever it might be. And here it's doing so in a balanced way. Here it's doing so in particular with relationship to the family. And so maybe on that day 6 Ach, in addition to blessing the corn, there's also something which is in there, which we could see as, kind of like if there is something within the family which is out of harmony, out of balance, or unstable, then 6 Ach would be the perfect day to, connect yourself with the heart of the sky and the heart of the earth, bring those energies into your heart and express what needs to be expressed in order to bring stability to the family. From 6 Ach, we then move into 7 Ish. So Ish, the Nawal of the feminine, Ish, the Nawal of the mother, Ish, the Nawal of the Mother Earth, of the shrines and of the altars. And here we see it connected with the number 7, which can represent death and endings, finality. It could also represent choices. Okay? And so in some ways we can see kind of like making our choices about the way that we engage with Mother Earth, making our choices about the way that we feed the altars and the shrines, making our choices about how we engage with our magic. Because for me, like Ish is also, it has this connection with our ability to speak the language of Mother Earth, our ability to speak this language of manifestation, which we use at the shrines and the altars. It's the way that we communicate with Mother Earth and ask her for what we need. Now, Ish days are great days for making our petitions, but also for making our offerings in whatever way that might be. Whether it is, cleaning up around the place, or whether it is, literally at the shrine, at the altar, offering kopal and candles, or whatever it might be, in gratitude for what we've received from Mother Earth. And in this time where we are, kind of like, let's say, seeding and reaping the benefit and bringing things into into ripeness, asking for our corn to grow, asking for our corn to be blessed or whatever it is that we're growing, we can understand how important it is to make our final offerings to Mother Earth in order to kind of like start to conclude this cycle of getting the seeds into the ground. So we can also see the number 7 representing choices. And, it's like if Ish is about kind of like asking Mother Earth for what it is that we might want or need. And the number 7 is about making our final choice, making our final decision. And it's like, right, okay, what do you want? You can have this, you can have this, you can have this, you can have this. All of those options are out there on the table. What are you going to ask for? How are you going to ask for it? What offerings might you make to Mother Earth in order to bring those things in? And, sometimes we get that kind of like decision paralysis. Well, I could have that, or I could ask for that, or I could ask for, and I really need some of that. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Choose one thing for now. Focus on that. Focus on what you want to bring to ripeness during this Anil Trecena and ask for Mother Earth to help you and make your offering. Show your gratitude. Give thanks for what you are receiving. From 7 Ish, we then go into 8 Tzikin, Washakip Tzikin. Okay, so Tzikin, the Nawal of the birds. Tzikin, the Nawal of the vision. And here, we see it with the number 8, which can represent wholeness. So it's kind of like the whole vision. This is like a completion of the vision. This is bringing it all together. The first bit and the last bit, we've completed it, and now we bring it all together. What a wonderful day. Tzikin should be prosperous. Tzikin can give us the clarity of vision. So, kind of like there's some great opportunities in this day. Now, when we make our offerings, I often see we're offering sesame seeds to the fire. And part of that is, yes, to ask Tzikin to bring us the vision. But another part of that is to make this offering of seeds to the birds in order to keep the birds off our corn patch. And it's like, how do you ensure that hungry bellies are satisfied? You give them what they want. Like the birds won't come and strip your corn if you're feeding them something else voluntarily. And so there's something of that to remember as well. This is within that whole vision. This is in that holistic vision for prosperity, is ensuring that everything prospers. We're not just being selfish with what we're growing and kind of like forget everything else. It's really important to include these things in our vision. So, on that day, Washakib Tzikin, yes, we might make our ceremony to feed the birds, to give something back for the visions that we've received, for all of that beautiful bird song that we may remember from the previous Trecena video. Giving our seeds to the birds, giving them a portion, making sure that they're fed as well. Why? Well, they're helping us to complete our vision. They're helping us to complete our prosperity. They're helping us to have clarity, to gain that whole vision. And that's what we might receive on that day. Sometimes we've got this little bit here, that bit there, that bit there, that bit there. The whole vision comes together. 8 Tzikin, bringing it all together so that we can understand how to move forwards in order to prosper. From 8 Tzikin, we then move to 9 Achmach. So Achmach, the Nawal of being a human, the Nawal of human beings, the Nawal of forgiveness and redemption. And here we see it with the number 9. Now the number 9 can represent the feminine, as it represents the 9 lunations that we spend in the womb. But it can also represent life itself, because that's also the 9 lunations we spend in the womb. And so we can see forgiveness for the feminine, forgiveness of the feminine, those two things come in there. But there's also this thing which I see as forgiveness of life. Now, we're in the Trecena of ripening. We could see this as moving up towards our final ripeness, there's a big kind of like day coming at the end of this Trecena. And, kind of like sometimes, I know that we have protective mechanisms that involve, kind of like getting mad at people or getting mad at ourselves or whatever it might be. But then there comes this point in time where we realize that if we are to really mature, then we just have to drop it. We just have to move on. We have to forgive. We have to release. We have to let go. That's the only way we can ripen. We can't ripen if we've got that bitter core. If we're holding bitterness inside of us, there's no way that we can become that sweet corn, as it were. You know what I mean? And so what we have to do is to forgive. What we have to do is to let go. And when we see it combined with the number 9, for me, I think there's a lot of that with life. And, here we are. We've all got lives. And I'm yet to meet somebody who hasn't been through something which, however it might be judged, has been pretty awful for them. Everybody goes through it. And whether it was something which was, let's say, kind of like somewhere where they didn't manage to get things as right as they'd have liked to get them, or whether it was somebody else did something to them, however it might be, there's a time that comes where we just got to let it go. It's just we can't hold that bitterness anymore. It's stopping us from ripening. It's stopping us from being able to, fulfill and gather our true abundance, our true joy, because we can't embrace that joy if we're carrying bitterness inside of us. And the way to get rid of it? Forgive. Let it go. Make our offering of the sugar to the fire. Release whatever it was that we were holding and then allow that caramel smell to come back to us. Forgive. Not always easy. In fact, most of the time is pretty difficult. Depending on whether it's somebody else that we're trying to forgive or whether we're trying to forgive ourselves. I mean, it's like, I don't know which you find the easiest. I think they all have their moments. But Nine Achmach for me is very much about this forgiveness of life, because life happens. That's what we're here for. We're here to mature, because as we go through our lives, we fall over, we get scars, we, kind of like all of that kind of thing. That's life. That's how we mature. That's how we ripen. That's how we yellow. That's what brings us being a true human being. And so, for me, that Nine Achmach is saying, right, okay, it's time to forgive life. Time to embrace life. And, if we see the other side of Achmach, that's not just about forgiveness, we see that it's enjoying being a human. There's a sense of, there can be a sense of lack of responsibility with regards to Achmach, because as humans, there's a part of us that's supposed to play and enjoy and, kind of like all of that joy that comes with life. That's what we're supposed to embrace. Nine Achmach can bring that out as well. So maybe don't plan to have too much of a focused and, kind of like mechanized sort of square day. Allow yourself to be sensual, to have fun, to create art, whatever it might be, on Nine Achmach, and enjoy the sweetness of life. From Nine Achmach, we then move into 10 Noch. Okay, so Noch, the Nawal of the mind, of the brain, I consider it to be the Nawal of the left brain in particular, representing information and knowledge, that which we solve problems with. And here with the number 10, representing two hands coming together. This is all about society. It is about community. So solving the problems of community. Again, it's all got to do with how we are ripening, how we're moving forwards, how we can bring this joy and abundance into our world. It's like bring our minds together, okay? We're trying to grow the best crop that we can to nourish our family, to nourish our children, to nourish our community and all that kind of thing. And, there's other people that have been doing this a lot longer than we have. There's other people that know how to control the leafcutter ants, or they can know how to, kind of like when to add a bit of fertilizer or whatever it might be. And so how do we overcome any problems? How do we overcome any, where do we find our information? Go out to our community, like tap into the community mind, the communal knowledge. 10 Noch is an excellent day for that. And it's not just about, kind of like receiving that knowledge to get a hand up. It's also about being the hand that helps the others. It's all about us coming together. As I said, it's like a group mind, a communal mind that helps us to understand how to overcome whatever problems that we might have that are stopping us from, kind of like going forwards into our abundance. Okay? So, as we move forwards from that 10 Noch, we move into 11 Tihash. So, 11 Tihash, this is a strong day. It is a very powerful day. It can be not always the most focused of days, which is kind of interesting because Tihash, kind of like having that discernment, having that clarity, having that focus. But here with the 11, kind of like going around all over the place. Now, if Tihash is that obsidian blade, if Tihash is the scalpel that cuts in order to purify, while the 11 is kind of going over here and over here and over here and over here. And the 11 can be extremely creative because it's taking us off into an area that we may not have been into before because we're following our intuition to go over there and then go over there and then go over there. But we're also doing that with a very sharp blade in our hand. So, kind of like, I think that there is a certain amount of novelty that comes from engaging with the number 11 because it takes us down paths that we haven't necessarily been down before. But, if you are going down a path that you haven't been down before, carrying a sharp blade, there is an element of being aware of those kind of things. There's an element of being, maybe a little bit careful or an 11 Tihash, because it's like if you're busy swinging the blade in an area that you haven't been in before, maybe you're going to cut off too much. Maybe you're going to kind of like wound with it rather than heal. Now, it's not to say that what you cut might not bring some kind of novelty that you haven't seen before, might create something in a way that we haven't created before. But I think that 11 Tihash is a good day to really keep our wits about us and make sure that, kind of like what we're cutting, we're not cutting too deep, we're not cutting too strong. Kind of like it is literally kind of a day to measure twice and cut once because, the slightly erratic nature of the 11 might suddenly mean, cut off a little bit too much there. We've got to kind of like be very aware of what we're actually doing with it. From 11 Tihash, we then move into 12 Kawok. Now, you know how normally I like to make sort of these videos at sunset as the 13th day of the Trecena, as the sun is setting on it. Then I get out and I make the video so that it's ready for those of you who are moving in a bit earlier than this time zone, so that, you'll get it on the first day of the Trecena kind of thing, But right now, the rains are beginning. So I'm out a little bit earlier to make sure that I can do this outside before the rain starts to fall. We could say that I'm using my life experience to understand when the rain is going to fall. Doesn't that fit rather well with 12 Kawok? And this is the understanding of the weather. This is the understanding of that which brings the corn from the ground. This is helping us to understand how we can use the experience that we carry in order to birth the new into the world. Kawok, the midwife, Kawok, the healer. But we can see Kawok being the midwife to the resurrection of the corn. The resurrection of the corn is Arpu. It's the return of the maize lord. And here, the 12 Kawok, kind of like this is the using our life experience to understand how to bring that into the world. Using our life experience to understand how to gauge the weather, to ensure that the ripening process, to ensure that our garden grows well. And so, yes, it may be, for me, 12 Kawok is also a day Kawok days are days on which we might be trying to wash through obstacles between us and our ripening. And it's saying, okay, what do we draw on for this? We draw on our previous experience, that which we've bundled together in order to help us to bring the new into the world. So again, if you're looking at it, if you're on that day 12 Kawok and you are faced with situations that you need to resolve, then this is clearly a day to be drawing on your life experience, stuff that's happened to you before, to understand how to overcome that and bring the new into the world. And then finally, we finish this Trecena on the day Oshlahu Arpu, on the day 13 Arpu, on a day which can be seen as a kind of like a great arrival, as it were. I mean, what more could you ripen to? Of course, it's the final day of the Trecena of Anil, because you've got Arpu, which could be seen as the connection to the divine. It can be seen as the sun. It can be seen as the resurrection of the corn. It can be seen as the Lord, as it were. And here, connected with the number 13, the connection to spirit. The connection to the ancestors. Kind of like for me, 13 Arpu could be seen as the return to the source. It's the connection with the sun. The 13 major joints of our body all turned on. The kayapa flowing and bringing us that connection to the divine, our connection to the spiritual path. This is what we're maturing towards. This is kind of like the ultimate ripening. Now, I often see, or kind of like for me, I often call the day 13 Apo the day when we really see ourselves, when we see ourselves and each other for exactly who we are, because of a particular kind of quirk within the calendar. That's why it happens. And so, be aware of yourself, be aware of others around you, and be aware of the reflections that come back with regards to what we might need to ripen within ourselves. But also, if we were looking for messages about our spiritual path, messages about what we are maturing towards, messages that come from the ancestors or the divine, then I would say that 13 Arpu may be one of the strongest days of the whole calendar to receive them. And so, it's a very potent day. A very important day where we come to that final ripeness. And, our ripeness should bring us joy. So it's really important to have a look and see, kind of like, how can I connect with the ancestors? How can I connect with spirit? In order to really understand, kind of like, how can I use the maturity that I have gained in this Trecena to understand better how to connect with my spiritual path, how to connect with spirit. Okay, so a bit of a long one again today. I hope that that's been interesting for you. And I'll see you again in 13 days' time for the Trecena of Imosh. Thank you.